Hi, I'm Shania and I live in Kenya. I was around 12 years old when this event took place. I lived with my mom and things were going really well until she got a job offer far away from where we lived. It was a 6-month contract and it paid well, so she couldn't say no. The only problem, I couldn't go with her. The job required her to move around a lot and I was too young to live alone, so a friend of hers helped her find a babysitter. Let's call the babysitter Lucy. She was a young girl, just out of high school, and now attending a nearby university. My mom let her move into our house with her things, and even stayed an extra night to make sure I was okay with Lucy. They made small talk, and I remember Lucy telling my mom,
"Some of my classmates are into witchcraft. I would never involve myself in stuff like that."
My mom really liked her. She figured I'd be fine. The next day, as my mom was getting ready to leave, I handed her our Bible and said,
"Take this with you. It'll keep you safe."
She smiled and gave it back. "No, you keep it, so it can keep you safe." But just before she left, I secretly slipped it into her luggage. Looking back now, I feel like something bad was going to happen to one of us. And I think it happened to me, because I didn't keep the Bible. A couple of weeks went by. Things were okay, except for a few strange occurrences. Lucy slept in my room, and a few times I woke up in the middle of the night to the sound of her praying. But it didn't really sound like praying, more like chanting. She kept repeating things like,
"Deliver me from evil and the snares of the devil."
It was during one of these nights that everything took a dark turn. She woke me up, this time on purpose, and she invited me to pray with her. I looked at the clock and it was around 11 p.m. I thought it was odd, but I said yes anyway. We knelt on the floor and she led the prayer. At first, it was normal. Then, she reached for one of my hands mid-prayer, and then the other. Before I could react, her grip started to tighten, tighter and tighter. My hands began to ache, her voice grew louder, and her tone, it became eerie. That's when I knew something was wrong, and I screamed. She stopped praying and just stared at me. And then suddenly, she lifted me up and threw me into her bed and pinned my arms down. She began slamming my head against the wooden bed frame over and over again, all while chanting her prayers louder and louder. All I could hear was my own screaming, her voice, and then the sound of our door being broken down. The neighbors had heard the commotion. They burst into the room and turned on the lights. And the moment the light filled the room, Lucy stopped. She became instantly calm, almost like nothing happened. A man pulled her off of me, while others led me out into the living room. I was in shock, traumatized. They called my mom, and she asked one of the neighbors to take me to their house for the night. As for Lucy, the neighbors were furious. They questioned her, yelling, demanding answers. That's when she screamed and ran outside. And then, she did something truly terrifying. She dropped to the ground and began to slither like a snake across the grass. And then she got up and vanished into the night. The next morning, my grandpa came to pick me up, and I went to live with my grandparents for the rest of the 6 months. Lucy never came back. She begged my mom not to press charges, and she sent a friend to collect her things from our house. To this day, the whole thing still gives me chills. But one thing's for sure, it taught both me and my mom a serious lesson. Hi, my name is Chris and I want to share my scary experience. I'm from Croatia and I live in Zagreb. One evening, my friend, let's call him Steve, and I decided to go for a walk. When we met up, we couldn't really decide where to go, so Steve suggested we meet up with our friend group. When we got there, I said hi to everyone, but after about half an hour, I started feeling kind of lonely. I was new in the group and I didn't have much to say, just laughing at jokes here and there. It was getting late and I started feeling sleepy. I checked my phone and saw it was 10:45 p.m. I turned to my friend Steve and said, "Hey, we came out for a walk, right? Let's go walk." We said goodbye to the group and left. Both Steve and I have always been interested in paranormal stuff, so he said, "What if we go to the cemetery?" I hesitated, but then agreed. From my house, the nearest cemetery is about a 15 to 20 minute walk. The one we went to was huge. When we got there, we were surprised. No security in sight. Usually there are guards patrolling to make sure nothing gets stolen or vandalized. We were a little confused, but ignored it and walked in. Immediately, I felt chills all over my body. It was summer, so I didn't understand why I felt so cold. The cemetery was actually pretty well lit, so we could see everything clearly. There were 3 paths, straight ahead, which led deeper into the cemetery, right and left, which led back to different exits. Of course, we chose to go deeper. We were walking and just chatting about random stuff, mostly girls. Then, out of nowhere, Steve said,
Hey, I heard if you whistle in here, someone whistles back.
That made me uncomfortable, but also kind of excited. I'd never seen or heard anything paranormal in my life. So I asked,
You think we should try it?
He nodded. I whistled first. Nothing. Then Steve whistled. Still nothing. I laughed and said,
This is stupid.
And we just kept walking. But about 5 minutes later, we heard it. A whistle. Faint, but definitely there, somewhere in the distance. We froze, looked at each other. Then, we decided to go check it out. We walked toward the direction it came from, going deeper and deeper into the cemetery. I don't know what we were expecting, but didn't find anything. And as soon as I was about to say something, we heard another whistle. But this one came from directly above us. About 3 meters away, there was a massive oak tree. We looked up and saw a huge, ominous shadow. It looked like a woman, not moving, just staring down at us. We both froze, staring up at whatever that was. My heart was racing, and then, suddenly, I felt dizzy. We whispered to each other in panic. Then we looked up again, and she was gone. We stood there, trying to make sense of what had just happened, and that's when we heard a meow. But it wasn't normal. It didn't even sound like a cat. It was more like a woman imitating a cat's meow. And that's when we ran. In pure panic, we sprinted in a random direction, not even knowing where we were going in the cemetery. I glanced behind me, and what I saw still haunts me. The woman was now lying on the concrete, not moving, still making that terrifying meowing sound. She was pale, skinny, and wearing a black dress. And her smile was huge, but unnatural. It was creepy as hell. I turned back around, kept my head down, and just kept running in one direction until I got out of the cemetery. And eventually, we made it out. I was in shock. I turned to Steve and said,
I'm going home. I feel sick.
When I got home, I was still shaking, still nauseous, still scared. And to this day, I've never gone back to that cemetery, and I never will. One of our acquaintances, a guy who used to be an assistant to a builder and architect, told us this story at a party. He said, Someone called Banna to do some house repairs, gave him the address and everything. So me, the master builder, and 2 workers grabbed our tools and went there. He explained that it wasn't easy to find the place. The neighborhood was deep in the south of the city, tucked away in a maze of streets. After a lot of searching, they finally found the house. It was hidden in a long, narrow alley. The house itself was empty. The owner, a very ordinary man, had taken his wife and kids somewhere else for a few days while the repairs got done. They started work around 8 in the morning. By 10 o'clock, the man telling the story stepped outside to check on the 2 workers mixing cement at the entrance. One of the workers was a middle-aged man, around 40. The other was young, good-looking, and cheerful. They were joking and working with their shovels when suddenly they noticed someone entering the alley. As he got closer, they could see him clearly. He was short, but his body was wide, stocky. His legs were short, but his arms were long, and his appearance overall was disturbing. Ugly, frightening. His face looked like something out of a nightmare, twisted with old scars and covered in blistered skin. The kind of face you'd expect to see on a monster or giant. He stopped a few steps from them and stared. Then he smiled, an awful, crooked smile. His eyes locked onto the young worker, and then he started moving toward him. Everyone froze, but the middle-aged worker reacted first. He gripped his shovel like a spear and pointed it directly at the man.
Don't come any closer,
he said. The strange man paused, but then he stepped forward again. This time, the worker's tone changed. firm, angry. He raised the shovel higher.
If you take one more step, I'll strike you down right here.
The man stopped. He stood there for a few seconds, thinking. Then his eyes darted around at all of them, and finally he turned and walked back out of the alley. They never saw him again, not that day, not the other 3 days they worked there. When the owner came back, they told him what had happened. At first, he claimed he had no idea who it could have been, but then something clicked. He paused and said, "You know, when I was a kid, my father used to talk about a poor man who had leprosy. Said he'd shown up in this neighborhood 50 or 60 years ago. He was sick, looked frightening. People used to run home when they saw him. Those who were brave enough would shout at him or curse at him until he left." Then he added, "But that man died more than 30 years ago. He's been gone for a long time." The man telling the story looked at us and said, "When we heard that, we all just froze. I couldn't sleep for weeks. That horrible face kept showing up in my dreams, just standing there, alone, watching." Hi, I'm Gwen and I'm 21 years old now, but the story I'm about to tell you happened when I was just 5. Back then, my family lived in a 2-story house that my parents rented. It was just me, my mom, my dad, and my mom's working student. We'll call her Mary. One afternoon, we were all in my parents' bedroom. I was busy playing games on my mom's phone, while my parents decided to head downstairs for a snack. My dad asked, "Do you want to come with us?" I shook my head, eyes still on the screen.
"Nope, I'll stay here,"
I replied. They didn't argue. They just let me be and closed the door behind them. A few minutes passed. I started to feel hungry, so I decided I'd head downstairs too. But when I walked to the door and tried to open it, it wouldn't open. I checked the doorknob. It moved, so I knew it wasn't locked. But I pulled again, and still the door wouldn't budge. I thought to myself, maybe Mary's holding it from the other side. We used to play little pranks on each other. This wouldn't be the first time. I called out,
"Mary, please open the door."
No response.
"Mary, open the door, please."
I shouted, now banging on the door. Still nothing. I let go of the doorknob for a second, catching my breath. Then, with all my strength, I pulled the door. It cracked open, just a little. And that's when I saw it, a headless figure standing right outside the door, dressed in a long white nightgown, and the figure was missing its head. I froze, my eyes wide. My tiny hands let go of the door. I backed away and began banging on the door again, yelling,
"Let me out! Let me out!"
Yes, I was terrified, but somehow I didn't cry. I tried to open the door again, and that's when I saw something even more disturbing. The headless figure was tying a big towel around the doorknob, looping it around the stair handrail. It was trapping me inside. Today, that might sound ridiculous, but 5-year-old me, I was panicking beyond belief. I pulled on the door again with all my might, but it wouldn't move. The towel was tightening, and then the figure started walking toward me. I could see through the slightly cracked door that it was getting closer and closer, and I could see the stump where its neck should have been. I screamed and slammed the door shut. A few minutes later, I heard a voice calling out. It was Mary. She came from the living room and walked up the stairs, finding me trapped inside. She looked confused when she found me.
"What happened here?"
she asked.
The headless person.
I said, my voice trembling. She stared at the towel tied between the knob and the handrail.
Gwen, did you do this?
I shook my head, frantic.
No, it was the headless person.
She sighed.
Headless person? Gwen, those aren't real.
I tried to convince her, begged her to believe me, but she didn't. She untied the towel and opened the door. I stepped out, still shaken, and scanned the hallway, expecting the figure to appear from around the corner, or maybe crawl down from the ceiling, but there was nothing. When I went downstairs, my parents were still eating. Did they not hear me? I ran to them and told them everything. They laughed. I eventually started thinking maybe I imagined it, just a child's wild imagination. A year later, when I turned 6, we moved into a new house, one that my parents owned. Mary graduated and moved away to become a teacher, and we didn't really keep in touch. Years passed and that memory faded, but recently we had a house deliverance, a cleansing, and ever since that happened, I haven't stopped thinking about that day. We were talking to a priest about the paranormal experiences we've had in the past, and I told that story again, this time with my parents sitting right beside me, and for the first time, they looked disturbed. My parents admitted something. They told me that back in that same house, when I was just 3 years old, they'd seen something too. They said I had an imaginary friend back then, and one day they saw me eating something invisible, saying it was a food that my friend gave me. That was the moment that everything clicked. What if it wasn't my imagination? Some people might say, why would a ghost show up during the day? Or why would it lock a little girl inside a room? But if it was Mary playing a prank, wouldn't I have seen her, head slouching forward in that nightgown? But no, what I saw was a human figure, standing upright, with no head on top of its shoulders, and I don't think I imagined that. My story happened back in 2017 when I was 15 years old. My family is originally from North Carolina, and we're Cherokee Native Americans if you're wondering. My parents raised me and my siblings to always treat other Native people with kindness and compassion. It's something they deeply believed in and something they taught us to carry with pride. This happened one summer afternoon around 4 p.m. At the time, I was working a part-time job at a small grocery shop across town to save up money for a trip. I had a 5:30 p.m. shift, and since I was the youngest of 6, with all of my siblings moved out and both my parents at work, I had to take the bus. As I waited at the stop, the bus was still about 15 minutes away. That's when I saw a man walking toward me. I didn't have my glasses on that day, so I couldn't make out his features at first, but when he got closer, I noticed he was Native too. He had long braided hair, a clean-shaven face, and was wearing a traditional Native necklace, the kind my grandfather used to wear. It actually made me smile. He looked to be in his early 20s, with deep bags around his eyes and a worried, almost paranoid expression. He kept glancing over his shoulder and nervously playing with his necklace, fidgeting. Something about him just looked uneasy. I kind of felt sorry for him, so I gave him a small wave and a polite smile. He saw it, but just nodded. After a few minutes, he turned to me and asked,
"Could you lend me some money?"
I instantly thought about the $35 I had in my pocket, money I planned to use later that night to hang out with my friends. So I lied. I said, "Sorry, I don't have anything on me." As soon as I said that, his face changed, not with anger, but with something like shock. Before I could even process his reaction, he looked over my shoulder. I turned around to see what he was looking at, and there was another man approaching, maybe in his 40s, wearing dirty work jeans, boots, and a black t-shirt. Something about him instantly put me on edge. I panicked. I grabbed my backpack and crossed the road, hoping they'd both just leave before the bus came. From the other side, I could hear them arguing, something about money. Then everything escalated so fast I couldn't believe what I was seeing. The man in the black shirt suddenly shoved the younger guy to the ground and screamed,
I told you I'd kill you if you didn't pay me back, you bastard!
Then he pulled out a gun and shot him 3 times, all in the head. My ears started ringing. I couldn't move. Some woman nearby screamed. I think she was sitting on a bench, but I barely heard her. I just ran. I didn't stop until I made it home, completely shaken, thinking I might be next. My parents called the police as soon as I told them what happened. I gave my statement and tried to cope with the shock. Now fast forward to 2020, I was talking to my mom about it again, and that's when she told me something I'll never forget. She had found out who the man was. His name was Ed City. He lived with a family of 5. They'd been struggling financially, and he'd been doing everything he could to support them. Turns out he had gotten involved with some very bad people because he owed them money. But according to his mother, he'd already paid most of it off. Apparently, he was only a few dollars short. He was just $20 short. $20. That's when it hit me. I had the money. I could have given it to him, I could have saved him. My parents raised me to be generous, to help others, especially those in our native community. But that day, I chose not to, and it haunts me. To this day, I can't stop thinking, what if I had just helped? Would he still be alive? I hope one day I can forgive myself, but right now the guilt and shame still eat me alive. Hi, I'm a fan of your show. This happened to me a few years ago. I'm a guy and I was in my 30s at the time. I live in a Scandinavian country. Back then, I used to go for walks late at night. It was a pretty safe area, or at least it used to be. But things started getting worse. More violent crime, mostly gang-related. Still, if you minded your own business, it wasn't usually a problem. So one night, around midnight, I was out walking. Up ahead, I saw a tall apartment building, and two men were pacing back and forth around it. I recognized the building. A retired teacher from my school lived there. She was probably in her 50s by now. It felt a little strange seeing these guys circle the place, but I didn't think too much of it. Then I noticed they were acting off. They were standing on their tiptoes, peeking through windows. One of them even picked up a stick and walked back across the yard. That's when I realized they were about to break in, and I had just walked into the middle of it. They noticed me. They stopped and turned and stared directly at me. My gut told me to move, fast, so I turned left to get out of there, but the path wasn't great either. It led past a school and an open lawn, totally empty. No people, no cover. I glanced back. At first, the men walked the other way, but when I made the last turn in front of the school, I spotted them again, hiding behind a bush, watching me, waiting. There's no way they ended up there by accident. If they weren't planning something, they wouldn't have followed me like that. At one point, I was almost home, so I did the only thing I could think of. I took my jacket off and held it up, like a decoy. Then, I ran, casually, back to my house. Nothing happened. They didn't follow me. But I know I got lucky that night. If I hadn't turned left, if I'd kept walking straight into the dark, they probably would have robbed me. I still go for walks late at night sometimes, but only for 10, maybe 15 minutes, and I always stay close to the buildings, somewhere people can see me, just in case. This happened 5 years ago when I was 15 years old. I was hosting a sleepover during the winter holidays. The weather that day was rainy and thunder was clashing louder than usual. I invited 5 of my closest friends over: Kai, John, Nick, Robin, and Marcus. We had all known each other since we were kids. Robin's uncle Blake also came over to keep an eye on us since my parents were away on vacation. They would not be back for a few days. My 2 bulldogs were with me too. Blake was a funny and easygoing guy, but he was no joke. He trained in professional martial arts and even coached MMA fighters. Everyone arrived that afternoon. I don't remember the exact time, but it was already pretty dark outside. The weather was classic winter with heavy rain and low skies. Blake ordered everyone pizza, and we decided to watch a scary movie. Honestly, it felt like the perfect night for it. The stormy weather set the mood. Halfway through the movie, the doorbell rang. We figured it was the pizza guy, and Blake went to get it. He looked through the peephole and saw the delivery man. He was about 6 foot tall and had a strange, unsettling expression. Blake said the guy gave him a bad feeling right away. He opened the door, and the man handed him the pizza. There were no words, just this long, creepy smile. Blake paid and shut the door quickly. Later, he told us it was one of the most awkward moments of his life. He just stood there while this guy silently grinned at him. Something about him felt wrong. Still, we brushed it off and continued watching the movie. By the time it ended, it was close to midnight. We all decided to sleep in the same room. It was the large guest room upstairs. Everyone brought their own sleeping bags. I slept on the bed, and so did Nick. The others set up around us on the floor. Blake stayed downstairs, watching his favorite Netflix series on the couch. We stayed up talking for about 30 minutes before finally falling asleep. Then, a shrug on my shoulder. Nick was trying to wake me. His face looked worried. He whispered, "Did you hear that?" There was a knock coming from the window. At first, I thought it was thunder, but then he leaned in and said,
I think someone's trying to get in.
My heart started racing. We stared at the window, frozen. The knocking stopped. Then a dark figure appeared right at the glass. They were wearing a black or gray hoodie. I could not make out the face, just a shape, a shadow, but it was close, too close. Adrenaline kicked in. I jumped out of bed and ran to the window. I locked it fast, just as the figure tried to lift it open. That was when I saw it, a crooked white tooth twisted into a vicious smile, but I still could not get a clear look at the rest of the face. I bolted back across the room and shook everyone awake. Then came the knocking again, louder, meaner. He started yelling something, but the words did not make any sense. It was like my brain could not process them. We ran straight downstairs to wake up Blake. Blake did not hesitate. He grabbed my 2 bulldogs and headed outside. We followed behind him. What we saw was disturbing. There was a ladder leaning against the side of the house. It was positioned right below the bedroom window. The knocking sound had been the ladder tapping against the wall as the man climbed. Blake spotted muddy footprints leading to the backyard. He ran that way. That was when we saw him. The man was crouched under a garden bush trying to hide. Blake charged at him, with the dogs barking beside him. The dogs lunged and bit into the man's hoodie, and Blake punched him hard and fast.
Call the police!
He yelled. We did. It took them a while to arrive because of the storm. When they finally got there, they arrested the man. Then came the part that still haunts me. The officers told us this was not the first time he had done something like this. And Blake? He swore it was the same guy who delivered our pizza earlier that night. Since then, I have never let my guard down, and my dogs, they sleep in my room now, every single night. Hey Wanzi, my name is Becky. I'm from a country in West Africa called Ivory Coast, and I have a scary story that happened to me when I was just 6 years old. Back then, I lived in a small apartment with my parents. It was a quiet building, and I didn't have any friends to play with. There weren't any other kids my age around. So my parents hired a babysitter to take care of me whenever they were busy. One day, I told my babysitter I wanted to play outside the building. She agreed, and we went out together. Right next to our apartment building, there was a small house made entirely out of wood, and that's where I saw them. A group of kids playing right outside the wooden house. I got excited and asked my babysitter if I could join them. She said yes, so I ran over and started playing with them. They were a bit older than me, and I remember they were all siblings. At some point, the older girl in the group said she had to cook something. I was curious and asked, "Can I help you?" She smiled and said,
Okay.
Then she told me to go pick up some small rocks, and some big rocks too. I didn't question it, I just did it. She brought out a big cooking pot and placed it over a fire, and then she began putting the rocks I collected into the pot. At first, I was confused, and I asked myself, what is going on? But I was just a kid. I tried to understand and tried to blend in. She covered the pot and waited. A few minutes later, she opened it again, and that's when I saw it. Inside the pot was rice and meat, cooked, hot, ready to eat. The same pot that was full of rocks just minutes before. I was shocked, but also amazed. I didn't understand how she had turned rocks into food. I remember thinking it had to be some kind of black magic. Then she invited me to eat with her and her siblings, and I was so close to saying yes. I was young, and I was naive, and the food smelled really good. But right then, my babysitter, who had been sitting a bit further away, noticed what was going on. She ran over and shouted,
Don't eat that food!
She grabbed my hand and pulled me away. We went straight home. She didn't even say anything on the way back. She just looked scared. Now I'm 16 and I still think about that day. What kind of magic did those children use? What would have happened if I had eaten that food? Ever since that experience, I don't like eating at other people's houses because I've seen with my own eyes that not every meal is what it seems. My name is AK. I've always wanted to share my story here, but nothing truly scary ever happened to me until a few days ago. It was during my university break. I'd come home to rest for a week. The first 4 days were fine, but on the 5th day, I heard whispering. It wasn't a hallucination. It was clear, real, right there. But I ignored it, told myself it was just the horror movie I'd watched earlier. Then came the 6th day. I have a little routine. I usually sleep in the large bedroom I share with my aunt, mom, and grandma. Then at 6:30 a.m., I move into my grandpa's room. He was always awake by then, out on the terrace getting fresh air, and his room is much cooler, easier to sleep in. But this time, I woke up at 3 a.m. I was half asleep, eyes closed, pillow and bedsheet in my arms. I didn't think twice. I knew the house well enough to walk with my eyes shut. I opened the door to my grandpa's room, and when I opened my eyes, my heart stopped. Grandpa was sitting upright on the bed, just staring at me, cold, empty eyes. I froze. Then I snapped out of it, realizing it was still the middle of the night. I forced a smile. "I'm sorry, Grandpa." He just grinned at me. I shut the door quickly and turned to run back. That's when I heard it, his laugh. I stopped in my tracks. The sound was so strange, so wrong. I opened the door just a crack, and he was already there, looking straight at me through the gap, still laughing. Fear washed over me. I ran back to Grandma's room, but when I opened the door, my aunt, my mother, and my grandmother were sitting there, all three, staring at me. Then my mother started laughing, and my grandmother joined, and then my aunt. The sound was deafening, wrong, twisted. I stood frozen as they laughed harder and harder, until suddenly, without realizing it, I started laughing too. It hurt, my side ached, I couldn't breathe. I fell to my knees, clutching my stomach, gasping for air, still laughing. The laughter wouldn't stop, and then everything went black. When I opened my eyes, I was in the hospital. My family gathered around me. My mother burst into tears the moment she saw me awake. She kissed my forehead over and over, whispering that the prayers had worked. I asked her what had happened. She told me, "That morning I stood up out of bed. My body arched backwards, my hands clawed through the air. I was on my tiptoes, my mouth wide open, and tears pouring down my face. And then I collapsed. As the doctor called my mother away, my grandmother and aunt followed her. And suddenly, it was just me and my grandpa. He leaned down, gave me the warmest smile he'd ever given me, and whispered, "Did you laugh your heart out, little darling?" My grandma is the kindest person I know, and I wanted to share a few stories she told me. We're from England. She used to be a nurse, so of course she's seen quite a few dead bodies. She once mentioned how awful some of the victims of gang violence were in London. Car crashes, though, she said they were sometimes even worse. She was a very tough woman. There was always one strange thing about her house. She said her dog refused to go upstairs because of one particular room. That room always felt cold. We found out why from a neighbor who casually mentioned that a woman had died in that very room years ago. My grandma always had weird things happening around her. One night, my grandma was working late at the hospital with a few doctors. She was alone in one of the wings when she heard the sound of a cane tapping slowly down the hallway. She didn't think much of it at first. There had been an elderly woman staying there for a long time who always banged her cane when she walked. But then she remembered something. that woman had passed away earlier that week. Still, the sound continued. Tap, tap, tap. She turned the hallway lights on. Nothing. No one was there. At first, she told herself it must have been the pipes, or maybe the old building settling. But the same sound came back the next few nights. Always at the same time. Always the same steady tapping. Eventually, she came to believe that the woman's spirit was still walking the halls of the hospital. But here's the story that I could never get over. The day my mom was born, my Nana brought her to the hospital to show her coworkers the baby. When she arrived, one of the doctors waved her over and offered us parking spot right next to the entrance. She was grateful. It saved her a walk with a newborn in her arms. She parked and went inside. Just moments later, she heard a loud, sickening thud from outside, followed by screaming. She ran out, and what she saw chilled her. A man had fallen from one of the hospital's upper floor windows. He landed directly on the car parked where she usually would have parked. It was the car of the doctor who gave her his spot. If she had parked in her usual place, in her tiny Mini Cooper, the damage would have been horrific, fatal. If my mom had been in the back seat, she likely wouldn't have survived. Later, she asked what had happened. The man who jumped hadn't shown any signs of distress. He had coffee that morning, chatted with nurses, and seemed completely normal. Then, without warning, he ran toward a window, shattered the glass. My Nana still talks about how lucky she was that day. Hi, my name is Nitin and I live in India. This happened to me in the summer of 2013. It was the month of June, during school holidays, and I was staying at my grandmother's house in the village. The house had 3 floors. I was there with my parents and both of my brothers. My dad comes from a large family. He has 6 sisters. There was one room on the ground floor we called the storage room. It was usually kept locked. Inside were large soil-lined tankers used to store rice. One night, I woke up and decided to go downstairs from the 2nd floor. From the hallway, I noticed that the storage room door was wide open. A dim light was glowing from inside. Curious, I walked in. That's when the strong smell of kerosene hit me. It was overwhelming. I started to feel lightheaded immediately. And then, as I looked up, I saw it, a burning figure, human-shaped, crawling toward me. It looked like it was burning, like it was on fire, but not screaming, just dragging itself across the ground, flames flickering off its body. I froze for a second, then I screamed and bolted upstairs. Right at that moment, I heard something crash behind me. It made a loud noise, and suddenly, everything went black. Then, the electricity came back on. I turned back to look again. The storage room was just as it had always been. No fire, no smoke, nothing out of place. I told no one. I tried to forget what happened, and I did for a long time. Until March of 2023, when my mother told me something strange. She said that back in March of 2013, 10 years ago, one of my dad's younger sisters had died in that very room. It was late at night and the electricity had gone out. She was sweeping the floor by the light of a small oil lamp, and something knocked the lamp over. It shattered and kerosene splashed across her. She caught fire instantly. She screamed and struggled until she passed out, still burning. By the time she got to the hospital, it was too late. That's when everything clicked. The smell, the fire, the shape crawling toward me. Had I seen her spirit that night? Why did I see her? Why me? What was she trying to tell me? Even now, I don't have answers. Just the memory of that moment and the feeling that something or someone was trying to reach out from the past. Hi, my name is Trey. I'm a 17-year-old black male from St. Louis. But this story happened 3 years ago when I was 14 with my older brother. Let's call him Jason. So, my brother and I decided to leave home at 2 a.m. to explore an abandoned school in our neighborhood. Yeah, I know. 2 kids sneaking out at that hour sounds reckless, but that's exactly what we did. We walked through the empty streets, phones in hand, and my brother, who was 20 at the time, carried his Glock 19X, just in case. Once we got to the school, we explored the crumbling hallways for a while before sitting down to eat some snacks and talk about life and women. But then, in the middle of our conversation, the air shifted. A tall, middle-aged man suddenly appeared around the corner with a grin that froze me in place. A quick note, the school sat right beside a dense forest, home to coyotes and deer, and the corner he came from, it led directly out of those woods. He was about 6'4", mid-30s, shaven head, dressed in a black jumpsuit. His steps were uneven, dragging his left foot across the ground, and even from a distance I could smell the alcohol on him. My brother's hand slipped into his bag, ready for anything. I was just 14, but I wasn't small. I'd been boxing for 6 years. My brother stood tall at 6'3". Still, none of that mattered when I saw the man's eyes. He looked empty, terrifying. He staggered towards us, lifting the bottle in his hand.
Want a drink?
He slurred. Every instinct in my body screamed at me. My stomach knotted, my skin crawled, and my brother grabbed my shoulder like he felt the same thing. The man muttered something we couldn't hear. When we asked him to repeat it, he smiled and said,
I wonder what your blood would look like on the grass.
That was when he started describing, in disturbing detail, how he could kill someone and feed their body to the animals in the forest. Then, without warning, he shouted,
Come here, you punks!
As he moved toward us, instinct took over. I stepped back, planted my feet, and drove my fist straight into his nose. Blood sprayed, and the man staggered. My brother drew his gun, leveled it at the man's face, and said through clenched teeth,
Don't move a finger.
The man laughed, blood dripping down his face.
I'm gonna kill you and your brother.
Before he could finish, I snapped. I started punching him over and over, yelling,
Get away from us!
And then, flashing lights, the police. A neighbor had heard the shouting and called them. They pulled me off the man. My brother and I told them everything. The officers arrested him, and we walked home in silence. The moment we stepped through the door, the weight of it all hit me. My chest tightened, and I broke down, sobbing uncontrollably. I'm 17 now, and my brother is 23. To this day, I wonder what would have happened if I had taken that drink from the man.